Hey there, my name is James and I am 38 years old. I am a manager at a real estate company. I've been working in real estate for about 13 years now. I am originally from the countryside. I came to the city right after high school for college, and ever since then, I've been living here. I started off working in a telecalling company as a salesman. I worked there for over 3 years. After about 3 years, I realized that I had a knack for selling things. I decided not to waste my talent in a telecalling company and quit my job. I wanted to sell something more challenging with bigger profit margins. That's when I set my eyes on the real estate market. I joined a real estate company as an agent broker and worked my way up to become a manager. Real estate doesn't pay much initially, but if you stick around, it can make you a fortune. The job comes with huge monetary incentives. It's been 13 years now that I've been operating in the real estate market, and I've soon planned to open my real estate firm. But that'll take time. Everything feels like a dream now. A boy from the countryside made quite a fortune by working in real estate. But there is another side of the story that I don't usually talk about. The one that revolves around love. Back in school, when I was 16 years old, I started seeing a girl, Rachel. She was beautiful, smart, and caring. I loved every single thing about her. She grew up in the city, so she had trouble learning the countryside ways of living. Her father used to be a big businessman, but he became an alcoholic and developed a gambling problem. He lost all of his fortune gambling, and now they had to move to the countryside. Rachel's mother, Mrs. Helen, used to teach in our school. Now, I was never the kind of kid that was good at studies, but I had a lot of friends. Hanging out with me helped Rachel make friends in the town, and she soon started to feel at home. We started off as friends, but then we grew closer. I remember the first time I asked her out. I had never dated a girl in my life, and this was the first time I was going to ask someone out, and it's safe to say that Rachel was one of the prettiest girls in our school. I was scared to death, but I mustered up all the courage I had and asked her out. "Hey Rach, I wanted to tell you something." "Yeah, sure. Go ahead." You're beautiful. And I like you." "That's so sweet of you, James. I like you too. You're a good friend." "Thanks." "You're welcome. I also wanted to ask you something." "Yeah, sure." "Will you go out with me?" "Are you asking me out on a date, James?" "Yes, no, I mean yes, if you don't mind." "Why are you shivering? Are you nervous?" No, I am not scared. And I am not shivering." "James, I never thought you'd say something like this to me. I thought we were friends and pretty good ones. I should have known. I should have seen this coming from miles away. You hurt me." "No, Rach. I am sorry. I am really sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. If you want us to stay friends, we'll stay friends. I really didn't mean to make you angry in any way." "I don't believe you." "I swear if you didn't like me asking you out, I won't ever do it. We'll stay friends. Just friends, nothing more. I am sorry. Please trust me, I won't do something like this ever again." "Haha. Got you." What? "I am playing with you, James. You look so cute when you're scared. I am just kidding. Calm down." "You're not mad at me?" "No, of course not. Why would I be mad at you for this? You're crazy. By the way, do you still want to take me out?" "Yes, only if you want me to." "You're so adorable. I thought you'd never ask. I would love to go out with you. And I like you too, James. More than just a friend." "You're serious, right?" "Cross my heart." "Well, I know this place that's not so far from our school. My friends and I go out there to hang out sometimes. We call it the Cliff, and it has the most beautiful sunset view. We can go to the Cliff tomorrow evening and watch the sunset. And then we'll go somewhere nice to have dinner." "Sounds like a plan." "Great. I'll meet you tomorrow after school." "Can't wait." It's a date. It's a date. It was one of the happiest days of my life. You know that amazing feeling when you ask your crush out and they say yes. Well, take that and multiply it by 100. That's how ecstatic I was feeling. I was scared before, but now that Rachel had told me that she liked me too, I was over the moon. I still remember that moment clearly, and now that I look back, I see a kid who felt like he had won over the world. The next day, I met Rachel at school and we talked for a bit. Both of us were blushing while talking. Rachel had her head down and she couldn't look me in the eyes. And I, on the other hand, couldn't wipe off the smile from my face while talking to her. Teenage love is such a beautiful feeling. After school, I took Rachel to the Cliff in my elder brother's car. I had begged my elder brother to give me his car last night, and he agreed to give it to me as soon as he heard I was going out on a date. I guess he knew it was a big deal for me. Rachel and I got into the car and we drove off to the cliff. I parked my car and we found a bench to sit on. The cliff was such a beautiful place. It was a little hill in our town and you could see the whole town from up there. And you could also see the sunset clearly from that elevation. We sat on the bench and I brought some soda and sandwiches that my mom had made. It was cold, but it was delicious. Back then, we didn't care about the details. All that mattered was that we were having a good time. We sat together and we watched the sunset while eating sandwiches and drinking soda. After the sunset, we got in the car and I took Rachel to one of my dad's favorite restaurants in the town. I knew Rachel was from the city, so I had no idea if she would like the place or the food. Turns out she loved it. She liked the place and she loved the food. We ordered some cheeseburgers, smoothies, and lemon pie. We sat there and talked for hours. She told me about her family and I told her about mine. You know, this is the restaurant where my dad met my mom for the very first time. Mom used to work here and my dad used to visit this place when he used to work with Grandpa in his garage. He loved the food here, but food wasn't the only thing that drove him here. He tells me he once visited this restaurant for 5 days in a row and ordered the same dish every single day. On the 5th day, Mom came up to Dad and asked him why he ordered the same thing every day. That's when my dad told my mom that he liked her and that he couldn't care less about the food. He came here only to see her. And then they started dating and eventually got married. That's so romantic. It's cute. Yeah, but it's not cute when you have to hear the same story about 1,000,000 times. They always bring up this story whenever we come here. And we come here a lot. Maybe they're just remembering the good old days when they were young and fell in love. You'd do the same someday with your kids. Yeah, only if I married someone I loved. What about you? I don't know much about you except that you're from the city. Well, my dad and I are from the city. My mom is from the countryside. Oh, no wonder. She got along with everyone so well in the school. Everyone says good things about her. Yeah, she's great. What about your dad? Well, my dad was from a very wealthy family. My grandfather owned multiple businesses, but he passed away when I was just a kid due to illness. After my grandpa passed away, my father took over the business. He did well initially, but then he developed a gambling addiction. He started losing money, and to cope, he started drinking. Eventually, drinking and gambling cost us all of our fortune, including our house. That's when my mom decided we should move to the countryside and start fresh. Mom could teach and Dad could find a job, but Dad's still struggling with addiction. So now it's just Mom who's bringing in money to make ends meet. Wow, that's a lot to digest. I know. It all happened so fast. We didn't realize when and how we lost everything. I am sorry about it. Well, don't be. My mom is happy to be here and I know my dad would be fine soon. He'd get a job once he gets better, and then everything will be fine. And for me, I am actually starting to like it here. All thanks to you, James. Oh, I did nothing. It was all you. Everyone likes you here. They wouldn't have if you were not with me. I am so glad that we met, James. I am glad too. We talked for hours and we were so into each other that we lost track of time. That's when the guy who worked at the restaurant told me that my father had called and told me to come back home. It was getting late. My father knew the people who worked at the restaurant. Rachel looked at her wristwatch and she told me that she needed to get back home. We left the restaurant and we went off to Rachel's home to drop her. We reached her home in a few minutes. We both got out of the car and she told me that this was the happiest she'd been in a very long time. And I told her that I had a great time too. Then she gave me a hug and a kiss on my cheek before she went inside her house. She went inside and I drove away. I still remember how happy I felt. This was the first time I went on a date and it went great. And to be honest, it almost felt like a dream. Everything felt surreal. I, who had never gone out with a girl, just went out on a date with the prettiest girl in my school and it turned out to be quite great. It was a great feeling. I had a constant smile on my face, thinking about everything that had happened that day on my way back home. I got back home, parked the car, and went inside the house. As soon as I entered the house, I saw my dad, mom, and brother standing right at the door, waiting for me. They saw me, smiled, and started shooting away their questions at me. They wanted to know how the date went and everything about it. I smiled and told them about everything on the dinner table. I had already eaten a lot, so I just sat there, telling them about everything, while others had dinner. Rachel and I dated each other for a couple of months, Then we got into a relationship. We were together till school ended, and then I went to a different city for college, but Rachel decided to stay home. Her father was sick, and she didn't want to leave her father's side. I insisted that I would stay in the town and join a college there, but Rachel didn't want me to compromise my education for her. She told me to go to the city for further studies. I went to the city, and we decided we would be in a long-distance relationship until her father got better. We stayed in a long-distance relationship for about a year or so, but then there was trouble in paradise. Her father was not getting better and she couldn't leave her father's side. We were starting to have differences. I couldn't take time out for her because of the college and my part-time job, and she was busy all day taking care of her father. We started having fights and soon we broke up. We decided to part ways for good. I never wanted us to separate, but I couldn't help it. We had a lot of things to take care of in our own worlds, and we barely had time for each other. We broke up and cut off all ties. We decided it would be best for the both of us to not stay in touch any longer. It was heartbreaking for me to let the one I love go away, but we didn't have a choice. Rachel couldn't leave her sick father and I couldn't drop out of the college to be with her. My parents had saved money all their lives to send me to a good college, and I couldn't walk over their dreams for my happiness and love. After graduating from college, I took a job at a telecalling company. I used to live in a cheap rented apartment back then. It was not a good place to live. I lived there for 3 years while I was working in my telecalling job. Then I decided to quit and join a real estate firm, and I did. Things started getting better after I joined the new company. They paid well, so I moved to a better apartment, and now I knew I had a clear pathway to earn good money. 7 years after I had joined the real estate firm, something strange happened. Something that I had never ever imagined would happen in a million years. One day I was going home from work on my car, and I drove past a dark alleyway. As I drove passing by it, I saw a glimpse of some people mugging an old lady. I stopped the car and turned around. I was trying to get into the alleyway in my car, but it was too narrow for a car to get in. I got out of my car and I screamed at them. The people who were mugging the old lady told me to go away, but I couldn't just leave that helpless lady all on her own. And I couldn't just go up to those people and fight them off. There were too many of them. So I decided to bluff. I told them there was a cop car parked a few meters away from me on the road, and I would count to 5. If they won't let that old woman go, I would call the cops and they'd be in trouble. They didn't buy it initially, but as I started counting, they grew a little anxious. By the time I counted to 4, they left the old lady's bag and ran away. After they ran away, I went up to the old lady to check up on her. She seemed strangely familiar. I helped her get up and she thanked me for saving her. I asked her where she lived and she told me she lived in an apartment 3 blocks away from there. I offered to drop her at her home in my car and she agreed. After a few minutes, we reached her apartment and she insisted that I come in and have a cup of coffee with her. I declined humbly at first, but she was persistent. Eventually, I gave in and we went into her apartment. I sat on a chair in the living room and the old lady went to the kitchen to get me some coffee. She came back after a few minutes, we talked for a while and I finished my coffee. I told her that I must leave, but she insisted that her daughter was going to be home soon and she wanted me to meet her. She wanted to tell her about how I saved her from the goons. As soon as she said this, the doorbell rang. She went to the door to open it and her daughter came in. When I saw who her daughter was, my jaw dropped. It was Rachel. The old lady was Rachel's mother. It was Mrs. Heather from the school. That's why she seemed so familiar. Rachel saw me and she was equally shocked. She saw me and I could tell by her face that she was confused. Her mother grabbed her by her hand, pulled her into the living room, and told her about how I had saved her from getting mugged. We both were speechless. We didn't know what to say. Looking at her after so many years brought back a rush of memories of the time we spent together. After a while, I thanked Mrs. Helen for the coffee and I left without saying a single word to Rachel. I didn't know what to do. I got in my car and I drove away. I reached home and I just sat on my couch thinking about what had just happened. It was Rachel, my first love. I was seeing her after 10 years. I was feeling so many different emotions altogether. It was overwhelming. I decided not to have dinner that night and I went straight to bed. I thought about her all night. The next day, I decided to visit Rachel again and apologize for dashing out so rudely. In the evening, after work, I drove up to Mrs. Helen's apartment to meet Rachel. I rang the doorbell and after a while, Rachel opened the door. She was confused to see me. I told her that I wanted to talk to her, but she didn't say anything for a while. She was lost in her own thoughts. I waved my hand in front of her face and she came back to the real world. I told her again that I wanted to talk to her and she told me that her mother was not feeling well and she was asleep. She said that we should go somewhere else to talk. And I agreed. She told me to wait and she went inside. After a few minutes, she came back wearing an overcoat and a muffler. I took her to my car and we went to a nearby cafe. We ordered coffee and then she asked me how I was doing. "How have you been, James? It's been such a long time." "I am good, Rachel. It's been 10 years since the last time I saw you. You haven't changed much." "You haven't changed either. You've gained a few pounds, though." "I guess I have. How have you been?" "All good. Just hanging in there. I didn't know you were in the city." "Yeah, it's a long story." "Well, I've got time." A few years after we broke up, Dad's health got worse. We moved to the city to get him treated, but he passed away in a few years. I am sorry to hear that. It's all right. He was in pain. I hope he's in a better place. I hope he is. It was lovely to see Mrs. Helen again. She still seems to be the lovely lady she was, back when she used to teach. Yeah, she tries. Ever since we moved to the city, she has been a little sad. I guess she loved the countryside life. Well, then why don't you go back? We can't. Why not? Some people won't let us leave. Some people? Are you in trouble? No, it's fine. I can handle it. It's nothing. Rach, I know we're not together anymore and we're meeting after a very long time, but I'd like to believe that we're still friends, and you can tell me about anything. All right, it's just when we moved to the city, Dad's medical bills were piling up. Mom had to leave her job and we had no money. That's when one of Dad's old business partners, Jeffrey, offered to help. He lent us some money for the treatment. After Dad passed away, he showed up at our apartment one day and started harassing us to get his money back. I told him that I would pay him back slowly once I got a job, but he didn't give in. He forcefully made Mom and me sell our house in the countryside to him. But it wasn't enough to pay his loan, so he doesn't let us leave until I pay him back his money, with interest. He can't do that. It's a crime. I know, but we can't do anything about it. I've taken up a job at a restaurant, and I pay him back every month. Rach, I can help. No, James, you don't need to. I am taking care of it. You don't need to get involved in my mess. But I can't see you like this. James, please don't make it any more difficult than it already is. We're not together anymore. I'll deal with it. All right, Rachel, but can we at least stay in touch? It's good to see someone from my past life. We're still friends, right? Of course, James. We'll always be friends. We can stay in touch. And my mom would love to meet you again, especially after I tell her that you're from the school. I would love to meet Mrs. Helen again. We talked for about half an hour and then Rachel left. She had to get back home to her mother, so I dropped her home. After this, I used to visit Mrs. Helen and Rachel quite often. Sometimes Rachel and I used to go out together for dinner. And sometimes Rachel used to invite me to her apartment and I used to have dinner with her and her mom. I had no family in the city, so I loved being around Mrs. Helen. She is a lovely woman. One day, I went to visit Rachel at her apartment, and what I saw infuriated me. I knocked on the door and Rachel opened the door with teary eyes. I could sense that something was wrong. I asked her about Mrs. Helen and she told me that her mother was inside. I went in only to find her apartment wrecked. The furniture was broken, there were shards of broken glass everywhere and everything was a mess. I went into Mrs. Helen's room and she was sitting on her bed crying. I went up to her and as soon as she saw me, she hugged me. I hugged her back and asked her what had happened. Rachel came in and told me that her mother needed to rest and she would tell me everything. She made her mom lay down on the bed and kissed her forehead, telling her that everything would be fine. We left Mrs. Helen's room and went to the living room. We sat on the couch and I asked her to tell me about everything. What happened here? Why is everything like this? And why was Mrs. Helen crying? Jeffrey came here a few hours ago with some of his men and started harassing us. He told me to give his back, but I had nothing. So he started raining down hell in the apartment. He wrecked everything he could see. I tried to stop them, but his men restrained me while he unleashed his rage on everything. They locked Mom inside her room. She kept banging on her door, but they didn't let her out. After they wrecked everything, they threatened me and went away. How could he do this? We need to do something about it. No, James. Please. I don't want you to get involved. I am getting involved and I am not doing this for you. I can't let this happen to Mrs. Helen. But James. Listen, Raksh. Mrs. Helen is sick and she should not be going through all of this. It'll make her condition worse. I don't know what I would do, but please let me help. Tell me everything about this Jeffrey guy. I'll see if I can do something about it. All right, James. Rachel told me everything about Jeffrey and how he had harassed Rachel and Mrs. Helen multiple times. Hearing all of this made my blood boil. I called my boss from the real estate firm and told him about this. My boss is a wealthy and resourceful man, and fortunately we share a good bond. I told him about everything and he told me not to worry. He would do something about it. I told Rachel that I would take care of it and that she doesn't need to worry about anything now. As soon as I said this, she broke down and hugged me. She cried like a baby with her hands wrapped around my neck. It made me remember all of the moments that we spent together when we were in love. That's when I decided to make Jeffrey pay for everything he did to Rachel and Mrs. Helen. The next day, I went up to my boss and he told me he had hired a group of the best lawyers in the city to fight the case, and they had agreed to treat this case as pro bono, or I'd rather put it as for free because of the goodwill my boss had with them. I, along with the lawyers, went to Rachel's apartment and we discussed the case. The lawyers told us that they'd be able to make a strong case against Jeffrey within a month. 1 month later, the lawyers went to court with their case against Jeffrey. Jeffrey was summoned in front of the court. Some of Rachel's neighbors came to testify against Jeffrey about the wreck he had made the other day. The case went on for 3 months, and after 3 months the court found Jeffrey guilty of harassing Rachel and Mrs. Helen and wrongfully transferring ownership of their house. The loan that Rachel had taken from Jeffrey was pardoned. Jeffrey was sentenced to pay a hefty fine to Rachel and was sentenced to spend years in prison. We had won the case. As soon as Rachel heard this, she hugged me and cried. She was finally free of Jeffrey and his tormentation. We went to Rachel's apartment and I told Mrs. Helen that Jeffrey would no longer be bothering her and Rachel anymore. She smiled and hugged me. She thanked me for everything I had done for them. It's been 6 years since all of this happened. After Mrs. Helen got her home back, she moved back to the countryside. And after Jeffrey was sentenced to prison, Rachel and I grew closer. Destiny had finally reunited us after 10 years. 4 years ago I married Rachel, and we've been happily married ever since. Rachel lives with me in the city and Mrs. Helen lives in her house in the countryside. We often visit Mrs. Helen and we've also hired a nurse for her. We try to convince her to live with us, but she's happy living in her own home. I guess she feels at home in the countryside and we respect that. Plus, my parents also live in the town and they often visit Mrs. Helen to check up on her. We've all become one big family now. Sometimes I look back and I still can't believe how everything turned out to be. How Rachel and I fell in love when we were kids, then we broke up and 10 years later we reunited again. All of this now feels like a movie to me. A movie with a lot of suffering in the middle and a happy union at the end. Also, Rachel and I had a son 2 years ago. He looks just like his mother and will be having another baby in about 5 months. I'll also be starting my own real estate company soon. Everything's working out fine. On the wedding day, I vowed that I would take care of Rachel and her family and never let people like Jeffrey bother them ever again, and I intend to stand by it for the rest of my life. They've already been through enough and I can't let them suffer anymore. I feel really lucky that I got to reunite and marry my first love 10 years after we separated. I guess love sometimes finds its way to make things happen for good, and I am so glad it did.